Phoebe, thank you so much for joining me on my man-hating Femosphere podcast. I'm surprised that you had the time in between dyeing your hair blue, adding to your piercings, leafleting and pastiching political content to community centre walls.
Every single time she spoke to a woman, it was immediately commenting about her hair, piercings, appearance. Some women were only identified by their hair colour. Can you imagine only being identified by your hair color? Going through the data set, there's some very interesting links which have been completely missed. This is actually putting women's lived experience to the wayside in favor of sowing this narrative of crazy radical feminists that are exactly as bad as their right-wing counterparts.
And my body shook for weeks after the release of the Epstein files because of my own experiences and of those I love. Honestly, a woman extracting it in that way, twisting it and repackaging it to be something else is particularly grotesque.
The way they posed it in the article is that 6 out of 10 women would potentially not date somebody because they didn't agree on Israel-Palestine. But it's actually 5 out of 10 men as well. And yet, once again, in the article, they have positioned the onus entirely on women. They're doing PR for patriarchy.
Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a trauma-informed therapist, life coach and disruptor of wellness norms based in Brighton, UK. This isn't another nice-to-have wellness podcast. Instead, this podcast seeks to redefine what it means to be well in today's world. Here, we challenge the status quo, seek to reunite wellness with social justice and improve accessibility, diversity and inclusivity within wellness and beyond. As a listener, you are not here to passively consume. Instead, you are an ambassador for real, embodied, societal and systemic change in the world. As your host, I stand for radical self-inquiry and being able to have those confronting but necessary conversations so that we can remember our collective humanity at this time. We're here for the revolution and you've got a front row seat. It's a total misrepresentation, and the idea that this comes from a progressive liberal publication is just, it's unbelievable. Many young women talked about empathy. Women have more of it than men, they said. Greta Thunberg stopped eating as a child because of climate anxiety. Sally Rooney said in a speech in March that solidarity with Palestine was the only way to fend off despair. But it wasn't just celebrities. Every woman I spoke to seemed to feel this way. In brackets, of course, not every woman is so progressive, but the trend is stark. The new Statesman's polling showed that Gen Z women were more likely to support causes such as feminism, environmentalism, and anti-racism than young men. Not caring about the news was inconceivable to the women I met. How could they not be progressive? How could they not be angry?
Yeah, more likely to support causes such as feminism, environmentalism, and anti-racism. Yeah, slightly more, but not that much. 68% of women feel positively towards feminism, 51% of men. So it's not actually like demonstrably that different. When we come to things like environmentalism, actually men were slightly higher. So I think that one's a lie again. Men are 63% positive towards environmentalism, 61% of women. So men are slightly more positive towards environmentalism than women. So that's also a lie.
Before we go on, I'd so appreciate you to hit follow or subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, click those 3 little dots next to settings to rate the show. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review or take a moment to explore how you can rate or review on the platform that you're listening or watching. This makes a difference. I truly believe we need to have more of these conversations to shake up the status quo. We'll beat the algorithm together with your clicks and shares. Now back to the episode. This paragraph, oh my God. One early spring evening, I went to Mince, a performance night in aid of 5 for 5, a crowdfunder for transgender causes. It was held at the Feminist Library in Peckham and, inverted commas, free for dolls, in brackets, trans women, cheaper for other trans people, and about a tenner for cis people. The walls were covered in women's liberation literature and posters on resisting immigration raids. A pole dancing class was taking place in the next room. The audience was nearly all young women. The lineup, a disabled Indian classical dancer, an improv double act called Margaret's, a Lebanese British singer who sang about displacement, love, and everything in between. It felt like any university performance night. A friend of mine read this whole article with a running commentary to me over voice note, and she read that paragraph and she was like, it paints it like it's a horror show. Like, it sounds like a great time.
Yeah. I felt like any university performance night as well. Like, harsh on the performers, girl. Like, calm
Yeah.
down. Everything is such a thinly veiled insult. Like, everything that she says.
Totally, and highlighting how, it's free for dogs, free for other trans people, as it should be. It's a crowdfunder for transgender causes, so but it still manages to feel and sound derogatory. A performer called Angel was doing a monologue about her former job in a
Yeah,
book.
100%.
She reads extracts from a book called Morning Glory Milking Farm, a romance fantasy smut novel about a milkmaid and a minotaur. In brackets, when I Googled the book, the first result on YouTube described it as a critique about late stage capitalism and toxic masculinity. Angel read aloud from the novel. She wondered what it would be like to be fucked by a bull. She paused. I've never had that thought. Maybe it's because I'm gay.
How it fits.
As Angel
Yeah.
analysed the problematic racial undertones of Morning Glory Milking Farm, I noticed the young woman sitting next to me seemed a little confused. She told me her name was Anna. She was 27 and she lived nearby. She'd stumbled into the feminist library after seeing a poster outside. She wasn't especially impressed with the mince performances. She thought they were under-rehearsed. She told me she didn't leave the house much because of her chronic fatigue and pain, which stemmed from reproductive issues linked to endometriosis. She ran an Instagram account on which she posted information about chronic illness. She interacted with a lot of other accounts dedicated to social justice. They all posted similar kinds of content, mostly memes of like the world burning, she's quoted. I was convinced that pain was an intrinsic part of being female. God, this is so difficult to read. Women are the ones that give birth, she said. Periods hurt. Early sexual experiences were often painful and pleasureless. You're taught to expect pain when you have sex. You're taught that so many forms of discomfort are normal. When Anna talked about sex, I was struck by how she almost sounded
Yeah.
like the American writer Andrea Dworkin. Like O'Brien, the influencer, Anna connected her radicalism to the inherent pain of being female. It was not far off how previous generations of feminists might have connected their politics to gendered violence. But the root of younger women's complaints didn't seem to be simply misogyny. It was far more amorphous, touching on almost everything about capitalism, about Britain, and about their lives.
What did she mean that we'd actually connected all of these issues and like figured out how they were actually all stemming from the same source?
Misrepresent. No, both you
Yeah.
and I have spoken with Anna, and she's
Yeah.
written also an article on Substack, which I do encourage people to go and seek out and read.
Mhm.
You can say more on this, and I also don't want to tell
Maybe
Anna's
we can get
story.
her on.
Yes, we definitely want to have a conversation with her, but I don't want to tell Anna's story for her. But the thing that I find
Exactly.
really grieving here is that Anna is somebody who experiences chronic pain and chronic health challenges, including complications from endometriosis. Now, I've experienced endometriosis. I was incredibly lucky because I had a male doctor who medically advocated for me, which is the exception, not the rule. I have observed and understand the levels of medical misogyny, how women are gaslit about their pain. I have a friend who had endometriosis who was not diagnosed for 10 years because she was told that she should just pop a painkiller and that her periods would be better. So, taking that into a context of very real health issues that women experience, and then saying that women think that they're born into pain, it's just such a crucifying take on women who are already experiencing pain and trauma.
Yeah, she really couldn't have used like a worse example of that. And then bringing me into it when that's not what I said, and it's also not what I make content about at all, just to kind of have some kind of weight behind her point, but not really making it. It's very, very incoherent. And all I can see is that she's taken somebody who has chronic pain and then said that they are positioning their resistance around the pain that they do experience as a woman in an inherently patriarchal medical system, which by and large, people are medically neglected when they have the same health issues that she has. So it's just so insensitive to disregard another woman's lived experience in this way. I can't believe that Emily was able to do this and put this out to the world.
I think it's cruel, this bit actually. Like jokes aside,
Yeah.
and my bit about me.
And Anna is so lovely.
I know it's BS about me. I know it's a misrepresentation. I have a high level of integrity within my work and I stand by everything that I have said and done. But this bit about Anna honestly, it hurts my heart, this, because to hear a woman totally misrepresent a woman's lived experience and pain in this way feels so unkind and cruel. Like, honestly, this bit really gets me of the article. And to invalidate the existence of medical misogyny, the existence of women's pain, the issue of things like endometriosis, and to just to dismiss it, like women think they're born into pain. I mean, it's a big no from me. Anna has a boyfriend who she described as a fucking Labrador. I mean, what does that mean? It also could be nice because Labradors are really loving and wonderful. He's reading books about how climate
Yeah,
change
I think it is.
isn't actually a big deal. And it's hard to separate that from the fact that he's not really faced much adversity in his life as a straight white man who is privately educated. She said, I'm probably the adversity in his life. Everyone that I know who's read this was like, yes. I mean, as a white man who is privately educated, that's not to diminish the individual experience that you have had, that your childhood, your unique brand of trauma and suffering that we all have within the microcosm of our lives. But on a systemic level, I think that we can all agree that somebody who is straight, white, male, and privately educated has not experienced the same level of systemic oppression as somebody else with a different identity. So I that 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 that's my rebuttal there. When he and his
I
friends
think it was like pretty astute of her to just mention it.
when he and his friends took, and I'll also back that up, by the way, with my husband, who is a straight white man who was privately educated. He was like, yeah, fact. When he and his friends talked about the world and politics, it sounded very different to the way she talked about her friends, who were all either female or non-binary. She couldn't imagine a group of men sitting around the pub saying things like, I'm really worried about what the WPD is going to do to disabled people. Anna didn't seem like a man hater. She quotes her, but I do kind of feel like the more revolutionary spaces that I'm drawn to are primarily disabled-led and queer-led spaces, that they're spaces and groups of people from the fringes of society that understand the need for change, because they are living through a time that is really tumultuous and difficult. I don't see that being a priority, particularly for straight, white, able-bodied men. You just need to go into activist spaces and understand. Just look at the demographics. I mean, it's mostly, and has been for a long time, led by the people who are most affected by these things. People of color, disabled people with chronic challenges in their life. There are more women, I would say, in any activist space or any solidarity space that I have entered myself into. There is a higher representation of women than men. So it's totally fair what she's saying here, right? It's just an observation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And when it comes down to to trans people as well, who are, at the forefront of a lot of resistance movement and a lot of struggle, it's because they are like some of the most marginalized people in society. They are the ones who are actually most likely to face sexual violence. Like, for such a tiny, tiny proportion of the population, the amount that gets railed against them by the establishment, the amount of actual legal curtailment of their rights. They're not allowed to be in certain spaces, not allowed to compete in sport. Like, the most marginalized people in society, and like trans people are those people, are the ones who also lead the resistance movement. And that is why this ilk of argument that this article is a takedown, a witch hunt, is often railed against trans people in the same way that it's being railed against us now, because we actually represent a threat to the systems of oppression. Because we understand the intersectionality and how all these systems are upheld by the same practices, by the same belief systems, and by the same people.
Okay. When I asked women what specifically had radicalized them, the war in Gaza was the most common answer. This spring, I went to Leeds to meet Ash, who was part of the university's Palestine Solidarity Group. The group was made up of mostly women, she told me. They organized Gaza fundraising events like bazaars and drag shows and attended regular Sunday morning pro-Palestine marches through the city. The Solidarity Group has raised more than £7,000 this year to support Palestinians. Amazing. Still, she felt anxious that she wasn't doing enough to help. I feel that. I feel a lot of guilt, even though I didn't commit any war crimes. Politics was Ash's whole life. She spent much more time on her activism than her university work. When she met up with friends, they'd talk about their lives, but it would always return to politics. She didn't like the UK. She was scared of racism and the far right. And outside of her female friends, she didn't think people cared about the issues that mattered most to her. There's nothing for me in this country, she said. Ash told me she didn't have any plans for her future. I mean, it's fair enough. She's at university. I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do at that age either.
Yeah.
I kind of put my personal life and personal goals and personal advancement on the side because I'm involved with these Palestine things. I just want to name here that when I was at university, all I did was get drunk. So it's very commendable that Ash is doing anything. If I can do something to make
Honestly,
someone else feel comfortable, I should. Ash first noticed that men felt the impact of the war, genocide, less keenly when she lived on the 2024 encampments outside the student union. One May evening, Israel struck a Palestinian camp in Tel al-Sultan in the southern Gaza Strip. The attack caused a blaze that set tents alight and killed 45 people. Ash remembered watching videos of the attack, feeling cold and hopeless. Several women began openly weeping. The male students, meanwhile, were preoccupied with planning the next day's protest. I feel like sometimes men don't feel the gravity of the thousands of people that have died, Ash told me. Men have to take a step back to actually see the situation and empathize with the person, but they don't. If the system is set up for you to benefit, it really doesn't matter. I wasn't sure how real or widespread this antipathy was towards the opposite gender. I've known several women who'd insist they hated straight white men, while evidently finding them enthralling, but it felt like the divides had grown wider since then, particularly among women who'd gone to university who were significantly to the left of their peers who hadn't. Okay, right, so we've met Ash, and it sounds like
that was a lot. That was a lot.
What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
honestly, big props to Ash. We love Ash. Yeah, when I was at university in my undergrad for sure, like I was nowhere nearly as politically engaged as this. So like well freaking done for putting your body on the line, getting out there in the cold, and standing up for Palestinian solidarity. I
Yeah.
think the bit that she speaks about here obviously like goes back to the point that we were making earlier, where men have been socialized not to express their emotions as openly as women have. So this is very much speaking to that socially conditioned dynamic, like which is oppression of men under the patriarchy, because people should be able to express their emotions however they want. Um, Also, our literal inherent magic to be able to or not bring in the next generation of people. Honestly, when I look at a crowd of people, sometimes I'm in awe, I guess, of the fact that every single one of these human beings that I'm seeing in this like mass of people was birthed by a woman. Like how much anguish, how much like bodily sensation has been exerted to bring all of these people into fruition. You know what I mean? So that because women have the ability to bring life into this world, we viscerally feel human life to be more valuable because we understand what it would be like to have birthed that human being. And like this is obviously I'm childless. I also don't want to have a child. Like this is an experience which I can only imagine. And I do understand what Ash is trying to articulate here, but I think also it is obviously modulated by societal conditioning.
Totally. You know, I also don't think that she is saying anything that a lot of people wouldn't understand, you know? Like I've
Mm.
had so many conversations with my husband about the ways that our bodies respond to witnessing the genocide in Gaza. It's not to say that he's not incredibly invested. And this is also not a blanket on stereotyping everybody into that bracket, but my body responds to watching children get bombed, orphaned, having their limbs blown off, having operations done to them under no anesthetic. It's like the cells of my body ache. And that's not an experience that my husband has. He feels rage, he feels pain. But for him, it's a different physical sensation. And maybe that's because he was socialized as a man. Maybe whatever.
Maybe it's not. Yeah, who knows
Maybe
what
it's
it
not.
is?
But it's
But
just an
some
observation.
people feel more than others, you know?
Totally. But also an
And I think this article is very much positioning as a female man thing when it comes from so many things about your conditioning as a person. She
yeah,
just so happens to have interviewed 5 women. Like maybe she should also go and have and interviewed the same number of men and to see
totally.
how they actually like physically, viscerally felt towards these
Yeah.
things that they've witnessed.
I'm very
You know, like it's
interested that she
extremely
didn't.
one-sided.
Yeah. And interesting that she didn't.
Mhm.
I do think that, you know, based on the data of polling men and women, why weren't men spoken to in this article? Men who are in the same social justice movement. I find it very interesting. It was a Wednesday night, and 7 members of the University of Leeds Feminist Society had invited me to join their book swap. We were in a classroom in the healthcare wing, and there was a pile of books on the table. Margaret Atwood's the Penop Penelope. So how do you say that?
I have no idea. Penelopiad?
Oh my God. Margaret Atwood, Enola Payad. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Margaret Atwood, and anyone that loves her. Audre Lorde, Tammy, a new spelling of my name. Someone had brought Heather Morris's The Tattooist of Auschwitz. We debated whether Harry Potter gets more respect than The Hunger Games because the main character is male, the racial politics of Wuthering Heights, and the sexual politics of Sally Rooney. This sounds like a great book club. The literary conversation was
Sounds.
one. I asked the table how they felt about the young men they knew. I don't care for them, said a girl called Ruby imperiously. She had red hair and lots of silver jewelry. They're not bad people, but they refuse to call out their friends who make other girls uncomfortable. They'll laugh at jokes that are sexist, racist, homophobic. They don't care about political issues. I don't think they like women a lot. If a man is attracted to you, she said, he might talk about things like toxic misogyny. If he doesn't fancy you, he won't bother. I feel like a lot of it is quite sexually motivated with men. I asked if they consider dating a man. This bit, okay, we're getting on to an interesting bit. I asked if they consider dating a man with different politics. They all immediately said no. I don't think I'd even be friends with one, said one girl. They don't see you as human. Only one woman, Evelyn, admitted to having male friends, though she was worried this made her a pick-me, trying too hard for male attention. Evelyn was concerned about what the men she knew were watching online. Fair enough. The stuff that's being said about women is crazy, she said. They're getting all these reels talking about I love how she puts in like. They're getting all these
Literally, because we're just comfortable. We're just having a conversation. And I'm sorry, but that's the lexicon.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
that's how British people talk.
I
It's trying
know.
to undermine us. It's trying to make us sound stupid, like we're not well reasoned in our argument.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
They're getting all these reels talking about bad stuff about women. I get reels of women saying bad stuff about men. I try to think not all men are like this, but Ruby had recently carried out a survey for a course. Actually, let's just pause there because
Yeah.
this bit was they spoke about this more on the podcast. This I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody who didn't align with your fundamental principles. Now, I know that you've seen the data on this, so let's come on to that. But it's interesting because when I saw this clip on social media, I said to my husband, babe, would you have married me if I thought it was justified to bomb children indiscriminately and if I wore a MAGA cap? Would you have married me? He was like, hell no. Obviously, I wouldn't. So it's not just women, is it? Is it, Phoebe? Because the data also
It
says
is
something else.
absolutely not just women. So first of all, I'm just going to go back to the actual, the way that this was polled.
Yeah.
So first of all, they were asked these questions in several different ways. So first of all, they were asked, out of a list of different qualities, what is most important to you when you are searching for a romantic partner? Okay. And in this style of question, they were asked to rank their top 3 things that they look for when they're looking for a romantic partner. Now, when it comes to people having the same political view, actually only 95 out of 855 men and 139 out of 1,141 women even included having the same political views in their top 3 ranked attributes. So some of the other attributes were things like, are you kind, funny, attractive, poor, wealthy, have a good job, ambitious, etc. I feel like the question on tall as well was very specifically aimed at women. So yeah, it's actually a very, very small percentage of the population even ranks this as being a highly important issue to them. When it comes to women, when it comes to your romantic partner having a different political view to you being a red flag, 121 men out of 855 and 212 women out of 1,141, which is 14% of men and 18% of women put that in their top 3, actually ranked that as being important. So and that is absolutely wild to me. So it's actually a very small percentage even
Yeah, and
care
it's
about it more
interesting
than if
that
somebody is.
it's interesting because also I suppose within the demographic of 18 to 35, what I was looking for in a partner when I was 18 was very different from what I was looking for when I was 30. When you're looking for someone that you can have a long-term sustainable relationship with, I don't think it's unreasonable to want the same values system as your partner. And, I watched the podcast bit on this and where they're saying, a lot of women who are anti-Trump, pro-Palestine wouldn't be in a relationship with someone that didn't align on those views. It reminded me of the James Baldwin quote, and he said, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." And that makes perfect sense to me. Why would you want to be in a relationship with somebody who didn't agree with you having the same access to dignity or safety or rights? And similarly, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody who didn't see that for other people in the same way as me. That would be a fundamental deal breaker for me. My parents, for example, they're not aligned on lots of things, but their fundamental value system and the way that they see and navigate and operate in the world is matched. It's quite a fundamental thing to want an alignment of your values. And the derogatory and scoffing way that that was represented in the podcast, I thought was like particularly strange.
Yeah, and they seem to have missed out half the data set as well. Because basically, on one of the main issues which they talk about, which is obviously Israel-Palestine, which is they don't actually say in the data whether it's people who are, pro-Palestinians not being genocided or pro-Palestinians being genocided, you know what I mean? But it's actually 58% of women would potentially not date somebody at all if they disagreed on this issue, but it's 49% of men. So the way they posed it in the article is that 6 out of 10 women would potentially not date somebody because they didn't agree on Israel-Palestine, but it's actually 5 out of 10 men as well. So this is a crux issue for the entire age category. And yet, once again, in the article, they have positioned the onus entirely on women to presumably say that we are the problem here. We're the reason why people aren't dating and having babies, because this is, at the end of the day, all about birth rates, as evidenced in the article. They're doing PR. They're doing PR for patriarchy. They're doing PR for capitalism, and they just want us to pop out more wage slaves and soldiers so that they continue to violently uphold capitalism globally. Like, that is the point of this article. And yeah, men also care. If you look at social justice, for example, okay, 74% of women would potentially not date somebody if they did not share the same views on social justice, but it's 63% of men. 6 out of 10 men, over 6 out of 10 men would like social justice is a deal breaker point. Donald Trump, 58% of women and 51% of men. Immigration was actually the one which had the biggest difference, where it was 66% of women, but still 51% of men. So it's still a majority of men that if you did not share the same view with them on that topic, they would consider it like potentially detrimental to their relationship in general. And then just kind of like a more neutral one, we have religion, which is 57% women and 58% men. So people are like, we're all very principled in this generation, evidently. We all very much care whether our values are mirrored by whoever we're going to be in our most intimate relationship with, which I think is actually just, I can't see this as a bad thing. Like,
Yeah.
young people have standards, understand boundaries, and respect themselves. That's what I'm hearing from this.
Yeah.
Like, women and men.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I watched it in the podcast, the three women having the conversation all looked quite shocked by this, with this kind of like scoffing between them. And I felt like all that exposed for me as an observer was their own privilege. Because, for example, somebody of color or somebody with an immigration status wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody that is racist or is against immigration. Like, that's a fundamental mismatch, right? So, a white woman, we have been able to step in and out of social justice issues because the status quo works quite well for us. So, typically we might be able to be more able to be with someone whose politics doesn't affect us so much because we get to step out of politics. So all this showed to me was three white women exposing their own privilege and having not interrogated their own racial biases and their own supremacist thinking and their own colonial thinking. That was what I saw, to be honest. So I felt like it wasn't exposing us. I felt like it was actually exposing them.
Yeah, every single judgment is a confession, ultimately. And yeah, it is an extremely privileged perspective to be able to be apolitical. That is so privileged, because it means that there is no legislation going on your body, which I actually would like to refute with these women anyway. Because if the right wing, if reform, if some representatives of the Tories who have now, abdicated to reform get their way, then our bodies will be being legislated on again by men,
Yes.
and we will lose our reproductive autonomy with all of these new pronatalist policies.
Uh-huh. And that was
So I just
interesting, right?
think
When I heard
they
you
need to
say,
realize that oppression never stops.
yeah. When I heard you say that there were more women who would, and only a small amount really, but there were more women who wouldn't be in a partnership with a man that wasn't aligned on their political views. The first thing that came into my head was, well, for me, if I met somebody who was a reform voter, for example, I would be thinking, well, where's your stance on abortion? Or where is your stance on women's safety? So as a woman, entering into a relationship with a man with different political views to you could indicate that he has opinions rooted in something that would be harmful to me and people like me. So that was also what I heard and interpreted from the data.
Yeah, well, I can tell you exactly what they say about that, because it's asked in the questionnaire. So
Fantastic.
they were asked here. For each of the following, which best describes your position? The ability to have an abortion in the UK is under attack. And men answered 37% and women answered 38%. So actually they're pretty aligned on this issue. Like, this whole article is trying to position women and men against each other, but actually on a lot of these key issues, even about women's bodily autonomy, like, they agree with each other. These groups are actually aligned on these things. So I think this article is actually the type of media that is sowing the divide in the first place.
Yeah, well, it's literally
They're accusing us of causing this divide when they are the ones who are propagating it.
they literally manufactured the Femosphere, you know? Oh my
Literally.
God. Okay, right. Okay, we've still got a bit to go. Ruby's incoming. Okay, Ruby. Ruby had recently carried out a survey for a course. She asked 30 final year students, 15 men, 15 women, how they'd vote at the next general election. Most of the women said Green or Labour. Men said Conservatives or Lib Dem. All the women around the table told me that they'd vote Green. Ruby also asked her respondents where they see themselves when they're 30. Of the men, all but 2 said they wanted to be married with children. Only 3 women said the same. Even the women in relationships didn't want to get married. None of the Leeds group found this surprising. Most of their friends felt that way. It's a much bigger deal for us to become mothers. We have to get rid of our career, Evelyn explained. I'm not fully against kids. I just really don't want to lose other things and become just a mother. I still want to be me, and I will probably lose that.
I think my main point here is where it goes on to say that I'm not fully against kids. I will have to get rid of my career. So if we actually look at the stats on this, 5 years after birth, mothers lose 42% of their incomes on average, and that is from the Office for National Statistics. In a book I was recently reading, there was a study from the 1980s, like from 1980s until 2030, which said that after the first child, women will lose 25% of their income on average, and it will never recover. So the important thing here is this article is positioned as like, women don't want to have children because they hate capitalism, they hate men, right? But we are living under capitalism, which is so bad at being able to feed people. The whole reason why we have census data is because people had to track exactly how many children were born, exactly how many people died, so that people couldn't claim assistance from the state off a dead person. So all of, like, a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of the administration that we have today comes from the fact that capitalism, like, just literally can't feed people and can't redistribute wealth to an extent that would allow people to actually subsist themselves by their own means under this economic mode of production. But when it comes to actually, like, women existing within capitalism and having to maintain their independence under capitalism, which would be the only way which we wouldn't fall back into the conditions which we were before the last 2 generations, where women had to be completely subservient to men because they were not economically stable enough to be able to support themselves outside of marriage. Like, having a child effectively under capitalism today puts women back into that situation with men. So that is the trade-off we're being asked to like give away our autonomy again to men, because we are not adequately supported financially to be able to bring children into this world. And like, this was not addressed in the article, but it's such a crucial point. I lament that I have to say man in this situation so frequently, because it's not about the divide between the genders. It's about one person becoming financially dependent on another person because their wages will never recover, and this making them vulnerable to abuse within that relationship. And like, we cannot ignore that this
Yeah. 100%. And it's, again, it's demonizing somebody's decision within that. And essentially, because of the whole approach of this article, it sets it up to be, well, women don't want to marry men because they don't like men. Women don't want to have children with men because they are these angry feminists and they don't believe in having children with these men. But what you're saying there, and the reality is that for a lot of people in partnership now, a lot of people struggle on one salary. If somebody takes, X number of years out, they can't financially meet the requirements of their mortgage and to meet all of their needs. It's a very live conversation that I have with my husband when we're talking about, do we want to try for a family or not? We're both self-employed people. So it's a very real conversation of, if I take 1 year, 2 years out off work, what does that look like for us? So for people to be drawing attention to, do I want children? And, I don't know about the implications on that and on my career, on my autonomy. And for it to be set up in this kind of angry feminist thing. I mean, it literally beggars belief, and is just so invalidating to the real lives of people living in our capitalist society. It has absolutely no socioeconomic context, this. It's literally crazy.
Yeah, and that is also discounting the social reproductive labor, which still disproportionately falls on women. Just look at the way in which today we exalt men who take their children to the park, or who are seen on the street with children in a baby carrier. They are like exalted as being, exemplary father. And still, yeah, the social reproductive labor is not compensated. The emotional labor is not compensated. And this all needs to be taken into account by every individual who engages in the process of reproduction. So what this article is trying to do is what capitalism has tried to do, and is what the patriarchy has tried to do, which is make reproduction a natural fact rather than a process which involves multiple people's vested interests, involve individual decision making, involves someone's actual physical body, that has different like socioeconomic constraints on it. And just saying, no, every single one wants to have a child, like, it obfuscates our choice, which is our power. Like, our power. And I'm going to posit the entire reason why the patriarchy exists is to prevent women from understanding, or like prevent us from collectively understanding, that half of the population has control over the whole population. We have control over the next generation of humans on this planet because of like some innate, inalienable fact of our physiology. And that power, like, this article has attempted to strip us of that power, just as the patriarchy and capitalism have done for as long as they have existed. Because we can really turn around to capitalism and say, fuck you, you're not getting any more wage slaves to uphold the system. And that's so dangerous to the systems of oppression. And that is what they don't want us to know.
To not also draw attention to things like, over the past 10 years of austerity. My mum was a social worker, and she's very invested in understanding the conditions in which children are raised. She's constantly pointing out how over the last 10 years, there has been a total decrease in funding to support mothers and families. A lot of organizations, community centers, public spaces, which would have supported mothers and families, have all been pulled back. And people rely on charities and grassroots organizations for that, not the government and money that is given in, councils, local grants, etc. So to take that out of the conversation of why women would and would not want to have children as well, it's just, there is so much context missing from this. And the one narrative that the New Statesman has is that these women are in the Femosphere because they don't want to have kids. I mean, it's honestly wild.
Yeah. Going back to the experience of of mothers in the system that we have today, in this like heteronormative monogamous system where children are raised by only two parents, and therefore women will either require more help from their immediate family, from friends, from their community, from charities, from third spaces, and how that support has been progressively taken away through austerity measures. But also kind of how this is still the default that is expected of us, when it's actually a very like unnatural way of raising children if you look at the entire breadth of human history. Obviously, humans are very creative creatures, and we have socially organized ourselves in like every possible way under the sun. But if you look at most indigenous societies, they have much more communal
Yeah,
child rearing practices
you
than
totally
we
get
have
it.
in the West. So
Mhm.
you're getting women who are already in and like in a unusually isolated position in this process of like child rearing, and then stripping them of everything that they require in order to be able to actually do that process and not suffer. So maybe we like need to seriously look at restructuring how we organize our families, how we raise children in society, and see that there are alternatives, and then present those alternatives rather than just flipping the whole conversation around and being like, babies just aren't being born because women hate men, women hate capitalists. Like maybe we need to start coming up with some other alternatives, because it looks a little bit bleak right now for women who are like corralled in their home and they don't have anywhere to take their kids, and they're never going to have their wages recover, so they're going to be dependent on this man no matter what he does. Like it's just bleak, and we can do something about it because we're humans and we're creative and we can figure out different ways of socially organizing. But I just want to open that conversation for like you and the people like who are watching, and
Mm, mm.
yeah, see what people feel about maybe doing something a bit different in our generation.
Speaking of impossibly bleak, Emily writes, it all felt impossibly bleak. Most of the women I met were educated, engaging, bright, and charismatic, but they weren't excited about their futures. They didn't like the men they knew or the idea of those they didn't. Men were just a threat who could harm or trap them, and the most privileged women were the most downcast. Is there anything in the data that supports that? And how are we defining privileged here?
I just vibes, I guess.
All right, okay, fine. Okay.
I have absolutely no idea. I have contacted Emily for comment on this, and I wanted to find out how she split people into these categories. I haven't received a reply. I don't know how she has defined who is privileged. This makes
Okay.
no sense to me. But ultimately, if 1 in 4 women have actually faced sexual violence, then it's not crazy that it's the whole bear or man situation again. You know, would you choose to be stuck in a wood with a bear or a man? And
Mhm,
then a majority of women choose the bear. And it's
mhm.
like we do actually have to be wary until we are like proved otherwise, or like maybe like somebody's vouched for,
Yeah,
because
totally.
otherwise, like ultimately, like men are the most threatening thing to us.
Yeah, yeah. And the male guest that I had on my podcast, the one that talked about manufactured male victimhood, something that he says is not all wasps, but we're all still afraid of them. Like if a wasp is like wasping around me, I am not going to
Mm.
assume that it's going to sting me. In the same way, not all men, but always a man, So when we're in a dynamic with a man, then we're always going to be wary of, is this the type of man that does XYZ, until proven otherwise. That is just a reality for women. So yes, I totally hear you on that.
Yeah,
But that is not to say that there are not brilliant men, because there are. And we know that. I have brilliant men in my
of
community,
course.
as I said, which also you are aware of. So to reduce us to just thinking that, all men are awful is quite something. It also didn't feel like students just trying on radicalism for fun. There is a real stratification of different groups under 30. The internet has pushed young men and women further apart. That is true. And the people they interact with on the internet reinforce their beliefs. Oh dear. I feel like we're getting our wrists slapped, Phoebe. In a vicious cycle, the Femosphere both reflects young
Yeah, I
women's
know.
dissatisfaction and perpetuates it, radicalizing them further. A significant majority of young women feel
Yeah.
isolated from the rest of the country. The two main political parties aren't reaching out to them specifically. They fear reform, yes. Many say they will vote for the Greens in the upcoming local elections, but few seem to believe that they will make a difference. I think that given the statistics of political parties, people have a right to be wary, but people are placing their hopes in different places. They don't, that was me, not Emily. They don't feel represented by mainstream politics and they don't think anyone cares. Their growing isolation could also have profound long-term consequences for British society. It will almost certainly make relationships harder. Fewer than half of young women feel men understand them. Young women are much less likely than men to date people who disagree with their politics. People will get lonelier and angrier. God, really painting a picture here. And it's getting worse. Among those under 30s, younger women feel the bleakest. Women under 25 are most likely to believe things are stacked against me no matter how hard I try. All the women I spoke to were involved in what they viewed as deeply moral missions to change a world that they believed didn't care about them. Of course, it wasn't making them happy. That was kind of the point, though. I think to be a person that cares about other people, said the lead student with the pink hair, you've got to be pessimistic. Some names have been changed. That's nice. I was never given the option to change my name because Emily never contacted me or spoke to me or reached out for comment. So that's nice. Okay, we've hit the end. What we got?
Yeah. Oh God. You know what? I'm gonna honestly just discount a lot of that because it was literally just really hardcore fear mongering. And then just skip straight to fewer than half of young women feel that men understand them. Actually, factually incorrect from the data. It's 51% believe that they do understand them. So that was a lie. Young women are much less likely to date people who disagree with their politics. As I have already previously showed, that is not true. Both groups are very unlikely to date people who disagree with them on very fundamental issues like genocide denial and like presidents accused of sexual abuse and who are criminals and war criminals. And then coming around to the people get lonelier and angrier. This entire article has been positioned as women are the problem. So she's saying we're the problem. We're making everyone angry. And presumably we're also going to be lonely. And that we felt we were deeply involved in moral mission. So I guess that just means, advocating for social justice, and that it didn't make them happy, but that was kind of the point. I think in what I said earlier was this is the only thing that makes me happy. This is the only thing, engaging in advocacy and fighting for liberation and engaging in resistance struggle is the only thing that truly makes me happy. So you have to be a radical optimist to do this, don't you? You have to almost be a little bit delusional, because once you really understand the systems of oppression and you really understand what you're up against, it's a lot. It is a lot. So I think you have to have a level of revolutionary optimism to even be engaging in this in the first place. What happens to you when you put yourself out on the internet is you get articles like this written about you, or you get bots in the comments. It's a constant flurry of people trying to stop you from doing what feels most authentic and purposeful for you as a being. And yet here we all are.
Yeah. Totally. Having gone through the article, what would you think would be your kind of plot synopsis? How are you left feeling in regards to being represented, about the positioning of the article? What do you have to say in summary?
I guess just literally that these patriarchal bootlicking women have exposed themselves as what they truly are.
Yeah. Yes.
And that every judgment is a confession.
I'm very surprised by this article. I was so shocked when you sent it to me because I had no interaction with the New Statesman, with the journalist, no idea that this was coming out and that I was going to be misrepresented in such a way, and so confused by the stance of the article. The article came out in the same week as, the revelations about the Rape Academy. We are still very much in the climate of the Epstein files and the fight for justice and accountability on that. The continual revelations of allegations against men in the public and in the wake of also the Manosphere documentary. To have this kind of article come out right now was such a confusing and strange stance from a quote unquote progressive liberal publication. But also just thinking, as I shared at the beginning, I recognize within my own journey, within my friendships, within my community, that there is an acceleration in the way that white women are speaking up. There is an acceleration of people with privilege who are using it for matters of social justice. And I think that they're rattled, like there's people being suspended from the Green Party, Keir Starmer calling Zach Polanski a Jewish man, anti-Semitic. People are rattled, and that is my main takeaway from this. I'm like, wow, it's like so many people in society have been come for. Like so many people in society have been come for. People of color, people who are seeking immigration status, trans people, the LGBTQ community. So many people have already been come for, and now they are coming for the white women who are aligning themselves with matters of social justice. We're really moving up the kind of like tiers here of people who are involved in social justice. So all I can say in summary is I think they're really fucking rattled. Even people on a liberal, left-leaning kind of continuum, because it's still part of the system. It's all still part of the system. So people who are speaking against the system right now, I just think they're really fucking rattled.
Yeah, for sure. They've almost made it to the apex of oppression. Like we're one step down. The only step above us is the white men.
Yeah, they're coming for the liberal white men.
They're terrified. They're terrified.
Oh my God. Okay.
That does bring me joy.
Yeah. It does. And also the comments on the videos shared on socials, the article. I think a lot of people were pissed by this because it's not just us, within the article. It's also what it says about women speaking out at this time, women who've experienced trauma, women who are speaking out on matters of social justice. So it threw us all under the bus at this time. And I think that a lot of people did not take kindly to this article. In fact, the only people really who agreed with it in the comments were the people cheering on, saying, yes, they're all misandrists, which I get on my socials every time I talk about issues to do with women anyway. It attempted to be a takedown of politically literate, intelligent, articulate, charismatic, angry women. And I think all it's done is make us angrier. So here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, love. Any closing remarks here?
Only know your power. Don't let the patriarchy or capitalism get to you. These have only been around for a very, very short amount of the total time that humans have existed on this planet. Yes, in that time, they have done like irrevocable damage to the ecosystem, to like our collective trauma. Know your power and understand that all of these systems of oppression are based on this one primordial domination, the expropriation of you from your own bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Amen, sister. I'm here for it. I know that we're going to have more conversations because it brought so much forward of things that we want to speak on. So thank you for your time and well done for everyone hanging in there with us. So yes, go forth and be angry women. Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.